Marshall Peak, Chapter 5827, Small Gift, Marshall Peak. In the main conference hall, Mi Jinglun looked at Yang Kai with a hint of apology. I know it's been tough for you to rush around, but we don't have much time to spare. We're counting on you to take care of the Red Flame Army's situation. Yang Kai chuckled. I haven't been in a fight for so many years. It's time to go and stretch my muscles. As he spoke, he stood up and walked out. When he reached the door, he suddenly threw something back that flew straight towards Mi Jinglun. Mi Jinglun caught it as he heard Yang Kai say, I brought a small gift for senior brother. Please accept it. By the time he looked up, Yang Kai had already disappeared. Watching Yang Kai leave, the staff members, who had been anxious for a long time, finally breathed a sigh of relief. Since Yang Kai had returned and was headed towards the E5 territory, it was quite likely that things there would soon be under control. On the other hand, the Black Ink clan had no idea that he had returned, and they would surely suffer a big loss once caught off guard. Supreme Commander Mi, since Sir Yang has returned, why not gather all the Ninth Order Masters and directly attack the no-return pass? Someone suggested. The Black Ink clan's advantage lay not only in the number of pseudo-royal lords, but also in the steady stream of troops. As long as they had enough Black Ink nests and supplies, they could continually spawn large armies. If they attacked the no-return pass and destroyed the high-rank Black Ink nests, they could completely cut off the Black Ink clan's supply of troops. Then the pressure on the human race would be greatly reduced. Currently, the Black Ink clan army seemed endless, but without the Black Ink nests, they would eventually be eradicated completely. Roughly 500 years ago, the humans had attempted this, but at that time, there were only 4 Ninth Order Masters and unfortunately, the Black Ink clan was on guard, so the attempt failed. But now, with Yang Kai's return, there were 7 Ninth Order Masters in total, almost twice as many as before. If they made another attempt, there was a high chance of success. Mi Jinglun held the box tightly and shook his head. It's too risky. Even if it succeeds, we may not be able to destroy all the high-rank Black Ink nests. If we can't cut off the roots once and for all, this move would be meaningless and would only put all the armies at unnecessary risk. Today was different from the past. The 12 armies of the human race were all fighting far from the rear lines and from each other, and the Black Ink clan had their own countermeasures in place. If the Ninth Order Masters suddenly disappeared, the Black Ink clan would surely take advantage of the situation. Without the Ninth Order Masters assuming command, the previously evenly matched situation could strongly tilt in the Black Ink clan's favor. By that time, the human race would undoubtedly suffer countless deaths and injuries, and the previously accumulated achievements might all be lost at once. The staff member who spoke thought about it and then nodded lightly. What Supreme Commander Mi said is true. I was thinking too simply. At present, the situation of the two races is such that our human race can only steadily fight while not showing any openings to the Black Ink clan. You must all remember this, Mi Jinglun replied. Yes, everyone responded in unison. Mi Jinglun withdrew his gaze and casually opened the box that Yang Kai threw to him before leaving. Since Yang Kai said it was a small gift he had brought back, Mi Jinglun didn't give it much thought, but the moment he opened the box, his expression froze stiff. Not only him, but all the other 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters in the main hall were instantly attracted to the object in the box. Lying in the box was a multicolored light pill, with a wondrous aura emanating from it that made both Mi Jinglun and the 8th Order staff feel as if the bottlenecks that had bound them for millennia were showing signs of loosening. Although they had never seen this kind of pill before, the 8th Order Masters who felt the abnormality at this moment recognized its origin at a glance. A supreme-grade open heaven pill, someone exclaimed. Mi Jinglun became even more shocked as the words passed through his ears. The small gift Yang Kai brought back is actually a supreme-grade open heaven pill? He couldn't believe his eyes. But only something like the mysterious energy of such a pill could loosen the shackles of an 8th Order Open Heaven Master. In this world, there was probably nothing else that could do this except for a supreme-grade Open Heaven pill. This was a priceless treasure that all peak 8th Order Masters dreamed of. It was an opportunity to break through the shackles of the Open Heaven Realm method. This spirit pill also represented the birth of a 9th Order Open Heaven Realm Master. With Mi Jinglun's many years of accumulation and heritage, if he were to refine it, he would surely advance to the Ninth Order Open Heaven realm in short order. Instantly, Mi Jinglun understood. This supreme grade Open Heaven pill was probably snatched by Yang Kai from the Chaos Spirit King. Years ago, he had talked to many masters who had returned from the universe furnace to find out about Yang Kai's whereabouts. Some had reported feeling Yang Kai's aura from afar, but also that he disappeared quickly. It seemed that Yang Kai was being chased by the Chaos Spirit King at that time. At that time, Mi Jinglun speculated that Yang Kai had probably gone to trouble the Chaos Spirit King again and snatched the supreme grade Open Heaven pill he lost in the great battle against the Black Ink clan. However, as Yang Kai had been missing for so many years, there was no way to verify this. It wasn't until now, with the spirit pill in his hand as proof, that Mi Jinglun's guess was confirmed. Yang Kai had indeed snatched the spirit pill back. No wonder the Chaos Spirit King had been chasing after him all that time. Encountering Yang Kai was bad luck for the Chaos Spirit King, who had to fight for the spirit pill several times. Gently closing the wooden box in his hand, Mi Jinglun momentarily pondered before saying, "I need to enter retreat for a while. You guys can handle things here on your own. If it's not an emergency, feel free to consult amongst yourselves." The others nodded in agreement. After that, Mi Jinglun stepped out of the main hall, holding the box tightly in his hand. At present, there were many masters at the peak of the Eighth Order Open Heaven realm, many of whom had made great contributions to the human race on the battlefield. These individuals were commendable, having risked their lives for the greater cause. They too required supreme-grade Open Heaven pills to break through their current bottlenecks. However, there was only one pill. Mi Jinglun was not a selfish person. If it were peacetime, he might not have cared about the spirit pill because he was not someone who was obsessed with reaching the Ninth Order. But this was war. He was the supreme commander of the human race's 12 armies. These armies had made continuous progress over the past 600 years, reclaiming more than 200 great territories. However, with such a long and distant front line, it was no longer appropriate to have the supreme headquarters set up in this location. After all, feedback from the front lines couldn't be timely, and would often affect decision-making and responses. Mi Jinglun had also thought about relocating the supreme headquarters to a position closer to the battlefield, but he didn't dare to do so because he was only an Eighth Order Open Heaven realm master, and the number of people left behind at the supreme headquarters was not enough to deal with a surprise attack if led by pseudo-royal lords or royal lords. If the Black Ink clan found the location of the supreme headquarters and launched an attack, it would be disastrous. Mi Jinglun's death alone wouldn't matter much, but if the supreme headquarters was wiped out, it would definitely affect the morale of the human race army. Without the central coordination of the supreme headquarters, the various armies would also not be able to coordinate with one another. In terms of information transmission, the humans were not as efficient and fast compared to the Black Ink clan. So, losing the supreme headquarters would be extremely detrimental to the overall situation. Mi Jinglun knew that if he could advance to the Ninth Order Open Heaven realm, all his past plans could be put into action. The supreme headquarters could be deployed towards the direction of the battlefield and receive frontline information in a more timely manner. When he saw the spirit pill, Mi Jinglun hesitated for a moment but ultimately decided to use it to break through to the Ninth Order. After Mi Jinglun left, the group of staff members gradually regained their calm. Although they might never have the chance to reach the Ninth Order, and the supreme grade Open Heaven pill would not be for them, they couldn't help but feel happy that another Ninth Order master was soon to be born in the human race. An Eighth Order master spoke in a low voice. Supreme Commander Mi's breakthrough is classified information and should not be leaked under any circumstances. Everyone nodded in agreement. The Black Ink clan now had a thorough understanding of the human race, with 6 Ninth Order Open Heaven realm masters leading 6 armies. Keeping in mind that they were probably unaware of Yang Kai's return, it wouldn't be long before the E5 territory plunged into a reign of terror. If Mi Jinglun were to break through to the Ninth Order realm, the human race would have a total of 8 Ninth Order masters, so concealing Mi Jinglun's breakthrough could potentially be used to their advantage in the future. Everyone here was smart enough to understand this. It was tacit even if Mi Jinglun did not give any orders about it. The E5 territory was a great territory with a designated code rather than a name. It had always been barren, with only a few universe worlds with martial dows even inferior to the star boundary before it flourished. Despite its lack of distinction, there were still quite a number of such great territories in the 3,000 worlds. When the Black Ink clan invaded the 3,000 worlds, they effortlessly took over this great territory, and the living beings on the few universe worlds here had no idea what had happened, falling victim to the disaster. After capturing this great territory, the Black Ink clan did not leave too many forces here, as neither they nor the human race paid much attention to such a great territory. However, 10 years ago, the E5 territory had become the battlefield where the Red Flame Army and the Black Ink clan fought. As Jing Lun said, over the years, the Black Ink clan had intentionally and unintentionally abandoned more than 200 great territories, forcing the humans to extend their battle lines, which gave them a chance to strike at the Red Flame Army. Retreating at the right time would not be considered a failure, but rather, a forward-thinking plan to make for a better counterattack. Under the leadership of Mo Na Yi, despite losing many great territories and some troops, the Black Ink clan's top combat power was well preserved. The string of losses had caused the Black Ink clan's anger to boil for hundreds of years, and once this kind of anger erupted, it would be unstoppable. As long as they could defeat the Red Flame Army, the Black Ink clan's years of forbearance would be worthwhile. That was why Black Ink clan was determined to win this war. The reason why they chose the Red Flame Army was because it did not have a Ninth Order Master leading it, making them easier to deal with. There were only a few Ninth Order Masters, but the humans were divided into 12 armies, making it impossible for each one to have a Ninth Order Master. Martial Peak. Martial Peak, Chapter 5828, E5 Territory, Martial Peak. In the E5 Territory, a massive battle was in full swing. More than a decade ago, the Red Flame Army had been on a winning streak, liberating numerous great territories one after another, until they advanced into the E5 territory where the Black Ink clan had long made their preparations, resulting in the two great armies engaging in a fierce struggle in the vast and boundless void. Over the last 10 years, large-scale battles occurred regularly, with both sides suffering losses each time. Despite the Red Flame Army's overwhelming momentum, they could no longer easily recapture this territory as they had done with so many before. After hundreds of years of retreating, the Black Ink clan army finally displayed an unimaginable fighting spirit and resilience. For the first time in hundreds of years, they began to push back against the Red Flame Army, holding them at bay. In addition, the continuous involvement of many pseudo-royal lords put enormous pressure on the Red Flame Army's masters. The pseudo-royal lords were almost equivalent to royal lords and Ninth Order Masters, beings no lone Eighth Order Master was a match for. At the very least, they needed to form a 5 elements or even a 6 paths formation to contend with a pseudo-royal lord head-on. And there were a total of almost 20 pseudo-royal lords in the E5 territory. This was a terrifying number as there would not be this many pseudo-royal lords participating at the other fronts in the war unless there was a Ninth Order Master present. The Black Ink clan's intentions were clear. They intended to use these pseudo-royal lords to deliver a crushing blow to the Red Flame Army to serve as a warning to all other human race master. Though faced with such a strong opponent, the Red Flame Army demonstrated remarkable determination. In each battle, many Eighth Order Masters gave their all, sacrificing their blood and even their lives in those battles against the pseudo-royal lords. Countless were those who had burnt out and faded away. They did all of this for only one purpose: to weaken the strength of these pseudo-royal lords, even if they couldn't kill them. The Black Ink clan took advantage of the large number of innate territory lords who had escaped from the primordial heavens source grand restriction to create a large number of pseudo-royal lords, which was an advantage that the humans could not match for the time being. However, the Black Ink clan had a weakness that was difficult to resolve. Once they were injured, it was hard to restore themselves. The injuries were not severe at first, as the pseudo-royal lords were strong, so it hardly affected them. However, once the injuries became serious, their strength would greatly decline, which also meant they had to enter a Black Ink nest to restore themselves. With each sacrifice made by the many Eighth Order Masters, the injuries of the pseudo-royal lords accumulated, forcing them to leave the battlefield and return to the no-return pass to heal. If it weren't for the continuous dispatch of new pseudo-royal lords from the no-return pass to assist in the battle in E5 territory, the war would not have been so fierce and the Red Flame Army might even have had a good chance of defeating the enemy. However, All of this was at the cost of a large number of 8th Order masters dying. Furthermore, to balance the power gap between the various armies, the Supreme Headquarters intentionally transferred divine spirits to the armies without 9th Order masters leading them. The Red Flame Army was no exception. Although they didn't have many divine spirits, there were more than 30 with them. Even the ancient dragon elders of the Dragon Clan, the Phoenixes, and other divine spirits were here with them, lending their aid. These divine spirits had lived for countless years and were undoubtedly stronger than the average 8th Order master. Although there was still a power gap between them and the pseudo-royal lords, their unique innate divine abilities made up for this to a large extent. Often, just 2 or 3 divine spirits working together could compete with a pseudo-royal lord. It was precisely because of these factors that the Red Flame Army had been able to persist. The situation was still very unfavorable, though, as the Black Ink clan had targeted the Red Flame Army as their primary enemy. Naturally, they would not let the Red Flame Army off so easily. In recent years, the Black Ink clan had continuously increased their military forces, putting tremendous pressure on all parts of the Red Flame Army. Any astute person could see that the war in E5 territory would ultimately end with the defeat of the Red Flame Army. The human race masters wanted to kill masters from the Black Ink clan, but wasn't it the same for the Black Ink clan? There were still many pseudo-royal lords waiting in the no-return pass, ready to enter the battlefield at any time. If Mo-Na were to throw caution to the wind and dispatch all the pseudo-royal lords, the Red Flame Army would have no way to fight back. The reason he didn't do so was to slowly grind down the human's strength like a blunt knife cutting meat. Although the pseudo-royal lords had suffered serious injuries over the past decade, not a single one died, while countless 8th Order masters had. But even if the humans knew this, what could they do? The Red Flame Army could not retreat, so all they could do was grit their teeth and persist. Seeking external assistance was also impossible as all the other armies were dealing with their own opponents and no one had spare power to lend. If it had been a few hundred years ago, when the human race was only defending the dozen or so original Great Territory battlefields, they could have requested reinforcements from nearby Great Territories. Because at that time, the distance between the various battlefields was not too great, so they could quickly go help and then withdraw. But now, with the human race's battle lines stretched out so thin, while the various armies were certainly coordinating their operations, it was difficult to form a situation where they could support each other. Mo-Na's plan finally came to fruition, and the constant retreat of the Black Ink clan proved that it was not all for naught. In the void, a standard warship charged forward, surrounded by countless low-rank Black Ink clansmen, who were nothing more than cannon fodder. Although there were occasional high-rank Black Ink clansmen, they posed no significant threat. However, in the vast void, this warship was always at risk of being destroyed, as the number of Black Ink clan soldiers was simply too great to defeat. To make matters worse, there were also several feudal lords hiding and striking from the shadows when they saw openings. Trapped here were 11 soldiers from the Red Flame Army 4th Division, led by squad leader Wang Qian and vice squad leader Zhao Li. Only one other member was a 7th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters, while the rest were only of the 5th Order or 6th Order. Although the human race now had the Star Boundary and the Myriad Monsters world as Open Heaven Realm cradles, not everyone possessed remarkable aptitude, most had an average talent. Only those highly talented ones received a lot of attention. Furthermore, even geniuses required time to grow and ascend step by step from lower orders to higher ones. Therefore, the majority of the large armies of the human race were still made up of 5th Order and 6th Order masters. However, the average cultivation among the human race masters had increased by at least 1 or 2 orders compared to several thousand years ago. On the Black Ink battlefield, having only one 7th Order master per squad as its squad leader was normal. While there was not a shortage of 7th Order masters, there were not too many of them either. Only those who had reached the 7th Order were eligible for the role of squad leader. But this particular squad was unique as it had not 1 or 2, but 3 7th Order masters, highlighting the general growth of power. In the Red Flame Army, such squad compositions were considered standard, and it could be said that it was rare for a squad to have just one 7th Order master in this army. Currently, some elite squads even had squad leaders who were 8th Order masters. The number of 8th Order masters among the human race was now quite significant. This was not only due to the accumulation over the years but also because of a surge in 8th Order Masters thanks to the ordinary grade open heaven pills harvested from the universe furnace. The overall increase in average cultivation also greatly enhanced the strength of various human race armies. Even so, Wang Qian's squad was currently in a tricky situation. During a previous large-scale clash with the Black Ink clan army, they got separated from their division. This was not uncommon during clashes between the two armies, as soldiers could easily get lost in the vast and boundless battlefield. Normally in such situations, the aim was to return quickly to one's division and reunite with one's comrades. Otherwise, being left stranded could make one an easy target for the enemy. Wang Qian also wanted to lead his squad back to their division, but they had the misfortune of encountering a group of the Black Ink clansmen along the way, forcing them to fight and flee. With the Black Ink clan's overwhelming numbers, the situation for the squad became even more precarious. The 3 7th Order Open Heaven Masters took up positions on different sides of the warship and continually unleashed the power of their secret techniques and artifacts, blasting away at the Black Ink clan soldiers. Suddenly, a cry rang out from the 6th Order Master responsible, "Squad leader, the defensive array is about to collapse. We can't hold on much longer." Another team member shouted, "The Tiger Roar cannon is overheating. We can only use it 3 more times at most." The Tiger Roar cannon was the primary offensive artifact of their warship, and every standard squad-class warship was equipped with one. When combined with prearranged arrays, 3 6th Order Masters could infuse their power into the artifact to unleash an attack equivalent to a 7th Order Master's full power strike. However, artifacts and arrays were ultimately lifeless objects, and using them too frequently in a short period could easily exceed their limits. The warship's primary armament was about to overload, and the defensive shields were on the verge of collapse. For the entire squad, this was adding insult to injury, as the former would greatly reduce the squad's might, and the latter would directly decide the safety of the squad members. Squad leader Wang Qian shouted angrily while fighting the enemy, "Zhong Wu Yu, don't shout, I'm already working on it," came the response quickly from the warship. He was the last 3rd 7th Order Master of the squad. In a hurry, he ran to the Tiger Roar cannon and inspected the artifact. He then quickly took out some supplies and activated his power to repair it. Zhong Wu Yu was not only a 7th Order Master, but also an artifact refiner. He was no Grandmaster, or even a Great Master, but generally, small damage to the warship did not need to be sent to the logistics department for repair, as he could patch it himself. On the other side, Vice Squad Leader Zhao Li had a face painted with fresh blood, looking quite disheveled. He had just charged out into the enemy's lines and killed a lot of them, easing the pressure on the squad. But he had also been injured and was now cursing out loud, "That damn Mi Jing Lun. Are we, the Red Flame Army, their forgotten stepchildren? Why don't we have 9th Order Masters leading us like the Soaring Cloud Army or Purple Feather Army?" As the saying went, unequal distribution of resources is worse than scarcity. Currently, there were 6 9th Order Masters among the human race, but there were a total of 12 frontline armies. In the beginning, Luo Ting he was in charge of Azure Sun territory and managed the Azure Sun army. Similarly, Wei Junyang managed the Wolf Fang army, so it was understandable that these 2 armies could have 9th Order Masters leading them. At most, it made people a little envious, but no one would say anything about it. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5829, Bloody Battle, Marshall Peak. After the Universe Furnace closed, Ouyang Yang Lai and Xiong Shan returned as 9th Order Masters and took over the Profound Nether Army and Blood Flame armies respectively. No one said anything about it since they had entered the Universe Furnace from Profound Nether territory and Blood Flame territory previously. It could only be said that Profound Nether and Blood Flame had been lucky. The Red Flame Army also had many 8th Order Masters entering the Universe Furnace at that time, but they were unable to ascend to the 9th Order. When Xiao Xiao and Wu Qing were freed, all the armies watched them expectantly, hoping that these 2 9th Order Masters would lead them to strengthen their forces. However, there were only 2 9th Order Masters and 8 armies hoping to get them. In the end, it was decided by the Supreme Headquarters that Xiao Xiao would lead the Soaring Cloud Army and Wu Qing would lead the Purple Feather Army. Some had considered consolidating the 12 armies into 6, in which case 6 9th Order Masters would be enough, but currently, each army had a massive number of troops. If two were to be combined, the number of troops would increase drastically, making it difficult to manage and coordinate. Furthermore, there would be more Ninth Order masters in the future. Did they have to split the armies once again when that happened? With these considerations, the Supreme Headquarters decided to maintain the status quo of having 12 armies. However, half of them would not have a Ninth Order master in command, so the Supreme Headquarters could only send divine spirits to provide assistance and maintain the balance. Upon hearing Zhao Li's complaints, Wang Qian could not help but scold. The Supreme Headquarters also has its own difficulties. What are you complaining about? I know, though Zhao Li was hot-tempered, he was not ignorant of the situation. He wouldn't usually bring up such issues, but the situation was dire and they were likely to perish soon. When a person was about to die, they couldn't care less about anything else. If you have the ability, then you ascend to the Ninth Order yourself and take charge of the Red Flame Army. Wang Qian cursed. Upon hearing that, Zhao Li became furious. Ascend my ass. I will reach my limit at the Eighth Order in this life. What's more, those bastards in the logistics department. I wanted to use my military merits to exchange for materials to upgrade the warship, but they refused. My military merits are hard-earned, why can't I upgrade my warship? If I had done so earlier, would we have fallen into this situation? I won't let those bastards off the hook even after I die. Wang Qian remained silent and focused on killing the enemy. Their warship was produced by the artifact refiners from the logistics department, and was the standard model that 99% of squads used. Even if it was a generic warship, each one cost a lot of resources to refine. In earlier years, soldiers were not prohibited from using their military merits to exchange for materials to modify their warships. Since military merits were earned at the cost of their lives, there were no restrictions on how they could use them. As a result, many preferred to upgrade their warships, believing that a well-equipped warship would not only help them survive on the battlefield but also increase their chances of killing enemies. Millennia ago, when Yang Kai led Dawn on the Black Ink battlefield, their warship Dawning Light was heavily modified at the cost of a vast amount of military merits. Yang Kai invested most of his military merits in Dawning Light, greatly enhancing its various capabilities and allowing the Dawn Squad to thrive in numerous bloody battles. However, in recent years, soldiers were no longer allowed to modify their warships in that manner. The higher-ups were not ignorant of the benefits of modifying warships, but now that the human race faced a scarcity of resources, each resource had to be carefully accounted for and allocated. How could there be any extra resources to give to troops for modifying their warships? Only some elite squads, through a lengthy application process, could exchange military merits for resources to modify their warships. Even then, the number of military merits required was far more than before. At this moment, it was unreasonable for Zhao Li to curse the logistics department as they were only executing orders from the higher-ups. However, with everyone facing harsh circumstances and potential death, venting his anger by cursing was understandable. Squad leader, the defensive array is about to collapse. A squad member shouted. Wang Qian looked up and saw the shield surrounding their warship had already dimmed and was on the verge of cracking. Taking a deep breath, he shouted, "Prepare for a final fight. Xiao Wu, activate the self-destruct array of the warship. Set it for 10 breath." "Yes," responded the Fifth Order Master who had been called out. Even if they had to die, they would kill as many enemies as possible. On the other hand, Zhongwu Yu, who had been repairing the Tiger Raw cannon, stopped. There was no point in wasting any more time. He took out his sword and leapt to stand shoulder to shoulder with Wang Qian, staring resolutely at the densely packed Black Ink clansmen surrounding them. One by one, the squad members summoned their artifacts and gathered around Wang Qian. Their momentum was soaring, and their aura was surging as they formed their battle formations. Even facing thousands of enemies, they advanced fearlessly. They would fight to the bitter end. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from the enemy army. In the next moment, Wang Qian and others' faces changed slightly as they sensed a vast number of auras disappearing in the surrounding area as if an endless number of Black Ink clansmen had died in an instant. But, due to the overwhelming numbers of Black Ink clansmen surrounding the warship, they were unable to see what was happening beyond them, leaving them bewildered. Just as they were in a state of confusion, they suddenly noticed ripples in the void ahead of them. As the ripples passed through, space shook and then shattered, causing countless void cracks to spread out like a school of fish swimming over them. The countless void cracks almost enveloped all of the Black Ink clansmen, yet somehow avoided where their warship was located, which fortunately remained unscathed. In the next instant, the Black Ink clan army that had cornered them, regardless of their strength or location, all spewed out black blood as they were sliced into pieces by the void cracks. Many of them died with bewildered expressions on their faces, not understanding what just happened. What? Wang Qian was stunned by the scene. Although he still didn't know exactly what had happened, the only thing he could understand was that a powerful allied master had intervened and instantly killed those Black Ink clansmen. What incredible power! He didn't even notice any energy fluctuations, just a layer of ripples, followed by the formation of void cracks that enveloped all of the Black Ink clansmen surrounding their warship, including the feudal lords who had been hiding nearby. The next moment, a figure suddenly appeared in the sea of corpses and blood. That figure locked eyes with Wang Qian and said nothing before nodding lightly as he confirmed that they were safe. Then, he took a step forward and disappeared. Xiao Wu. Wang Qian suddenly snapped out of his trance, turned his head, and shouted, "Stop." He had just given this squad member the command to activate the self-destruct array after 10 breaths, and he didn't know if he could stop it now. At a glance, Wang Qian breathed a sigh of relief as Xiao Wu seemed to have been stunned by what just happened and was standing there motionless. Squad leader, who was that? The division commander? After a moment of silence, one of the team members spoke up and asked. Division commander? Zhong Wu Yu turned his head and glanced at the person, snorting softly. Division commanders don't have that kind of power. What they just witnessed was not something an 8th Order division commander could accomplish. How could they possibly annihilate such a large number of Black Ink clansmen in an instant, including several powerful feudal lords? Although an 8th Order master could indeed destroy such an enemy force, it would not have been this swift and effortless. Not an 8th Order master? The person who spoke was stunned for a moment, then exclaimed in shock, "Could it be? It's Senior Yang." Zhao Li's eyes shone brightly. Although Yang Kai had only appeared for a moment, Zhao Li recognized him. Zhao Li had always regarded Senior Yang as his goal to strive for. Previously, he ascended straight to the 6th Order, so the 8th Order realm was the limit of his life, and the 9th Order was out of his reach. However, Senior Yang directly ascended to the 5th Order in the past and was now in the 9th Order Open Heaven realm, giving many people like Zhao Li hope that he might just still be able to grow to that height one day. Therefore, Zhao Li had done a lot of research on Yang Kai and even personally went to High Heaven Palace to pay homage to his statue. Not only Zhao Li, but Wang Qian also recognized Yang Kai and was full of excitement. He muttered to himself, wasn't Senior Yang trapped in the universe furnace? It wasn't a secret that Yang Kai was trapped in the universe furnace. Anyone who paid attention to him knew about it. How could he disappear for hundreds of years if he wasn't trapped there? So, Wang Qian couldn't figure out how Yang Kai appeared there. Zhao Li chuckled and said, for that senior, being trapped in the universe furnace is nothing. He must have found a way out on his own. Zhong Wu Yu nodded and continued, heroes arise in troubled times. With Senior's return, the Black Ink clan is in deep trouble. In any case, we owe him a lot this time. We would have been doomed without his intervention. Everyone nodded in agreement. Haven't you guys thought of something else? Zhao Li smiled. What else? Senior's appearance here means that the Red Flame Army now also has a 9th Order master leading us. Only then did everyone realize this. The Red Flame Army had always hoped to have their own 9th Order master leading them, like the other 6 armies. Unfortunately, there were only so many 9th Order masters around, so how could their wish come true? Now that Yang Kai had appeared in E5 territory, did it not mean that the Red Flame Army would have a 9th Order master assuming command as well? Their long-cherished wish was finally about to come true. For a moment, everyone became ecstatic. After being uplifted, Wang Qian quickly gave orders, and the warship swept in an arc towards the direction of their division. At the same time, Yang Kai's figure flickered and moved rapidly towards the vast battlefield in the void. Setting out from Supreme Headquarters, he had been hurrying all the way and arrived at E5 territory in less than half a month. After ascending to the 9th Order, His control over space principles had become more proficient, making his travel time shorter than before. If it was before, it would have taken at least a month or two to travel such a distance. When he encountered Wang Qian's squad being besieged on the way, he casually rescued them. For him, it was not a big deal, but he didn't expect that Wang Qian's squad would have some misunderstandings after he showed up. The intense main battlefield was in sight, and Yang Kai used Thunder Shadow's innate divine ability to conceal his figure and aura. For over 600 years, there had been no news of him. Not only did the human race think he was trapped in the universe furnace, but so did the Black Ink clan. Not even Mo Na Yi could imagine that he would suddenly appear at this moment. Since that was the case, then he would announce his return with a giant slaughter. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5830, Operation Jade. Marshall Peak. Amid the vast void, the massive armies of both the humans and the Black Ink clan were engaged in a bloody fight. Warships flew about as secret techniques and divine abilities were shot in all directions. Between the unleashing of evil purging divine spears and the spread of the black ink clouds across the void, countless lives were constantly lost in the chaos of the battlefield. One warship could no longer hold up against the Black Ink clan's fervent attacks. The defensive array shattered, and breaths before the warship was annihilated, numerous silhouettes shot out into the enemy lines with the determination to go out fighting. Wherever the Black Ink clan gathered, the human race masters made sure to target the area with the strength of their artifacts, and they managed to carve large swaths into the enemy lines. Ever since the Red Flame Army started sieging E5 territory, brutal battles had broken out countless times. The fighting was most intense on the main battlefield, but outside the main battlefield, many other areas had been turned into smaller battlefields too. This was a feverish battle between the masters from both sides. The Eighth Order Masters, the Divine Spirits, the Territory Lords and the Pseudo-Royal Lords were clashing across the many smaller battlefields as well. Now and then, dragon roars and phoenix cries echoed across the void, the strong, sonorous roars reaching the ears of both allies and enemies alike, shaking the hearts of all. The death toll soared on every single battlefield. The Red Flame Army did not have a Ninth Order Master assuming command, so to face off against the Pseudo-Royal Lords, the Eighth Order Masters had to use battle formations. Most of the time, a single Pseudo-Royal Lord was able to keep 5 or 6 Eighth Order Masters occupied. Even the Divine Spirits formed groups of 2s and 3s to deal with the Pseudo-Royal Lords. Fortunately, the humans had benefited greatly from the Universe Furnace. Many new Eighth Order Masters had emerged over the years already, and the ordinary grade open heaven pills that the humans brought out from the Universe Furnace led to the birth of even more Eighth Order Masters. Had that not been the case, the number of Eighth Order Masters in the Red Flame Army would not have sufficed for them to keep the enemy at bay. Many factors went into deciding the victory of a battle as significant as this. Although the fight had been going on for quite some time now, both parties were still at a stalemate. On some of the battlefields, the humans had the advantage, but on others, the Black Ink clan were in a better position. Achieving victory would depend on which side was able to make the most of their advantage and widen the gap to eventually make it snowball into a decisive win. But, for the time being, both the human race and the Black Ink clan lacked the means to enable them to achieve such an effect. For the past decade, the Red Flame Army had fought similarly intense battles with the enemy numerous times, but they were never able to gain a decisive edge, though they were never on the losing end of the fight either. All in all, the situation remained a stalemate between both sides. However, as time passed and the number of battles increased, the situation began to look bad for the humans. This was because the Pseudo-Royal Lords that the Red Flame Army were up against were far too decisive and ruthless. The Black Ink clan's large numbers of Pseudo-Royal Lords imposed a heavy burden on the Red Flame Army. None of the Eighth Order Masters or the Divine Spirits could face off against the Pseudo-Royal Lords alone after all. Yet, the Black Ink clan had sent nearly 20 Pseudo-Royal Lords to E5 territory, which ended up occupying a sizable portion of the Red Flame Army's top combat power. To hold their ground, the Eighth Order Masters fought valiantly with no regard for their lives as they confronted the Pseudo-Royal Lords. They figured that even if they could not kill the Pseudo-Royal Lords, they were still going to do their best to injure them. As long as the injuries kept mounting, they would have a chance to kill the Pseudo-Royal Lords. Therefore, though the pseudo-royal lords were injured time and time again, many of the Eighth Order Masters had been sacrificed as well. In the last 10 years, nearly 200 Eighth Order Masters had died at the hands of these pseudo-royal lords, but right up till their deaths, these Eighth Order Masters had given their all to inflict wounds that would make it hard for their enemies to recover. 200 Eighth Order Masters was not a number that could be overlooked. Back on the Black Ink battlefield, no great pass would even have 100 Eighth Order Masters in total. The humans were only able to withstand such heavy losses because their heritage had strengthened and more Eighth Order Masters kept rising. While the humans used this method to fight against the pseudo-royal lords, the Black Ink clan's strategy to counter them was just as simple. They sent the pseudo-royal lords who were too injured to fight back to No Return Pass to recuperate and deployed unscathed ones to join the battle. This meant that the pseudo-royal lords the Red Flame Army was dealing with had changed throughout the last 10 years, though the total number on the field remained the same. There was still a large group of pseudo-royal lords hanging around at the No Return Pass. That being said, Mo-Na did not send all of them out. Firstly, it was because there had to be masters standing guard at No Return Pass, and secondly, it was feeding into the strategy he had in mind. This was the best way to consistently deplete the human race's strength. In this way, Mo-Na actually shared Mi Jing Lun's stance. The current battle between the human race and the Black Ink clan was not for the sake of claiming great territories for themselves, but to weaken the enemy's forces. The fact that both parties had the same idea led to the devastating battle at E5 territory. Aboard a purifying Black Ink battleship in the Red Flame Eastern Army's possession, the Eastern Army commander Zhuo Qiuyang was going through the reports he received from the battlefield and giving out orders as needed. His expression was grave, and the atmosphere inside the warship was tense as well. The humans' 12 armies had all fought against the Black Ink clan on the Great Territory battlefields for thousands of years, so without enough Ninth Order Masters available, armies were still under the command of experienced Eighth Order Masters like Zhuo Qiuyang. All 12 armies had massive numbers, so it was hard for an Eighth Order Master to take control over the entire situation alone. Thus, the armies mimicked the system of the Great Passes of the past, splitting into Eastern, Southern, Western, and Northern armies which formed a single Grand Army when combined. Naturally, each army had a master leading them. Doing so made things a little more complicated as the 4 army commanders would have disagreements along the way, but there was no other choice. Without a Ninth Order Master to take the lead, the humans had to rely on the veteran Eighth Order Master's battle experience and perceptiveness to make appropriate arrangements. Thankfully, they had spent several millennia getting into the right mindset, and the 4 army commanders of the Red Flame Army had formed an impossibly close relationship. They were able to work as one to command the entire army smoothly. Their rapport and mutual understanding after so many years of working together enabled the Red Flame Army to display their maximum strength at all times and fend off the Black Ink clan's attacks time and time again. The Black Ink clan failed to gain any upper hand in their fights so far. Out on the battlefield, things could change at any moment. Amid the intense fighting, everyone was focused on their immediate vicinity and it was difficult for them to pay attention to the situation happening elsewhere. Thus, it was easy to get into the situation of having great success on one battlefield while losing miserably on another. Masters could break through the enemy lines and slaughter their troops or suddenly be under siege and in need of rescue with little to no warning. The Red Flame Army's masters were only able to maintain an equilibrium across all the fights because the commanders kept moving them around as necessary. Inside the purifying Black Ink battleship, Zhuo Qiuyang had only just given out an order when the observer who was keeping an eye on the situation out on the battlefields called out in alarm, "Sir, a group of Black Ink clan members have broken through the lines and are charging straight at us. They're coming over now with 2 pseudo-royal lords in the lead." He checked the monitoring array and was able to quickly confirm their identities. His voice trembled as he exclaimed, "It's Jiang Kai and Hu Yu." Zhuo Qiuyang's eyes flashed as he scoffed, "Here I was wondering why they'd gone into hiding. So, this is what they were up to." After clashing all these years, the Red Flame Army knew full well who the pseudo-royal lords they were facing were. Although the pseudo-royal lords were rotated in and out a lot more than the territory lords, there were a few pseudo-royal lords that the Red Flame Army considered their biggest threats. Jiang Kai and Hu Yu were 2 such pseudo-royal lords. Though they were not necessarily stronger than other pseudo-royal lords, they were more cunning and harder to anticipate. The Eastern Army had fought against these two pseudo-royal lords many times. The Eighth Order Masters had formed battle formations to try and injure the two of them, but they never succeeded, and a few Eighth Order Masters had been sacrificed along the way. Ever since the start of the current battle, the Eastern Army had paid close attention to the pseudo-royal lords' movements, but they never found any trace of these two. Thus, Zhuo who was in command here, was not surprised that they showed up now. The fact that they were charging over so openly made it clear what the two pseudo-royal lords' goal was. They wanted to defeat the enemy by slaughtering the leader first. As long as they killed Zhuo, the Eastern Army would be left without a commander. Even though someone else could take over the task of giving out orders to the Eastern Army, that would take time to organize, and would leave an opening to strike at. Thus, the Black Ink clan would have the chance to overwhelm the Eastern Army. The Black Ink clan's determination was seen from the fact that they were sending two pseudo-royal lords to accomplish this goal. Furthermore, they also brought a large group of territory lords with them. As the Black Ink clan assault team surged forward, the Eighth Order Masters moved to intercept them, but the two pseudo-royal lords did not even bother to look at the humans. Instead, the territory lords broke off to keep these Eighth Order Masters occupied. Black Ink's strength kept spreading out wherever they went, and with the strength of the many Black Ink clan members, they were able to clear a bloody path through the human army and charge towards the purifying Black Ink battleship. "We can't hold them back, sir." The master who was reporting on the situation cried out in alarm. With the way things were going, their enemies would soon be able to fly right up to them, and when that happened, everyone inside the purifying Black Ink battleship would meet a disastrous fate. Zhuo eyed the two figures in the distance with a cold gaze. Despite not being their equal in terms of combat strength, he showed no sign of wavering as he commanded, "Execute Operation Jade." His voice was steely and left no room for objections. Everyone was shocked and some wanted to advise against it, but they could not bring themselves to do so. They had been under Zhuo's leadership for many years now as they fought against the Black Ink clan all this time. They had killed countless enemies and received immeasurable glory. They had a deep reverence for Zhuo and knew what kind of person the Eastern Army commander was. Thus, once he gave the command, all of the masters inside the purifying Black Ink battleship jumped into action. Human silhouettes whizzed about as the other warships began breaking off from the massive purifying Black Ink battleship and flying off into the distance. Meanwhile, Zhuo and a few other Eighth Order Masters stayed behind. Not only did they not leave, but they even began flaring their auras. It was obvious what they were doing. "I'm right here." When the two pseudo-royal lords who were charging over saw the warships leaving the purifying Black Ink battleship and flying off with many human race masters on board, they thought that Zhuo had fled. However, when they sensed his aura, they no longer had that worry. In fact, they chuckled to themselves. Is he trying to let his subordinates escape because he knows he's doomed to die? They did not mind. Their goal was to kill Zhuo. Once they killed the army commander here, they were confident that the Black Ink clan would be able to slaughter the entire Red Flame Eastern Army before swallowing up the rest of the three armies. By doing so, they could deal a catastrophic blow to the humans. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5831, Explosion. Marshall Peak. Zhuo came from Profound Sword Paradise and entered the Black Ink battlefield when he was a Sixth Order Master. After spending over 10,000 years serving at Profound Sword Pass, he went from being a Sixth Order Master to an Eighth Order Master, and also exhibited a talent in strategy and command that surpassed his peers. When the Profound Sword Pass was still in existence, he served as Eastern Army Commander. Later on, the human crusade to the primordial heavens source Grand Restriction ended in defeat and the army was forced to retreat. Profound Sword Pass had stayed back to delay the enemy, but the Black Ink giant spirit god attacked them viciously. In the end, Profound Sword Paradise's Ninth Order old ancestor died in that battle. Zhuo had been fortunate enough to escape with his life. With the help of others, he was able to stay alive and retreat to No Return Pass. Later on, the No Return Pass had been lost as well and war broke out in the Barren Territory as the Black Ink clan invaded the 3000 Worlds. Thus, Zhuqiu Yanghua could be considered an extremely experienced 8th Order Master. Not many 8th Order Masters had a longer service record than him. No one could object to him being in charge of the Red Flame Army's Eastern Army and by default the army commander of the entire Red Flame Army. Throughout all these years, he did not let the human race down. Under his leadership, the Red Flame Army had slaughtered countless enemies and gained a massive amount of military merits. However, now that two pseudo-royal lords had their eyes on him, he knew he would not be getting lucky this time. The many millennia of fighting had made him intimately familiar with matters of life and death. Thus, now that his predestined time was upon him, he was neither fearful nor frantic. His heart was at peace, though he did have some regrets. After all, he had spent nearly all of his life engaged in the war against the Black Ink clan, but he would not have the chance to witness the human race's ultimate victory. It was not to say that he did not see this day coming. As an army commander, he had already planned for a situation such as this beforehand. He knew that sooner or later, the Black Ink clan would rely on the strength of their pseudo-royal lords to execute the strategy they were currently using, so he prepared for it in advance. Operation Jade was the counter he created for such a situation. If a powerful enemy came to strike him down and he had no chance of victory, he was going to take them down with him. The pseudo-royal lords were picking up speed and closing the distance as a powerful aura locked onto Zhuqiu Yanghua. As he stood unmoving, he declared, "Brothers, sister, it has been my honor to fight shoulder to shoulder with you today. After today, we will join hands and conquer the afterlife next." One of the 8th Order Masters chuckled, "That's the way it should be. It's a shame we won't be around to witness the end of this war," another one remarked. Another voice rang out, saying, "The time to kill has come." The 8th Order Masters who remained behind had known from the start that they were most likely headed for their doom, but none of them felt any fear. On the contrary, when faced with such enormous pressure, their thirst for battle intensified. Zhuqiu Yanghua's typically calm face broke out into a wide grin as he exclaimed, "In that case, charge." As he spoke, the 8th Order Masters channeled their world force into the arrays, and in the very next breath, the massive purifying Black Ink battleship which had been quietly floating shook before shooting forward in a flash. The two pseudo-royal lords who were charging over had been completely calm at first, but they were startled when they saw what was happening. Though they knew full well just how stubborn and full of resolve the humans were, they were taken aback by such an aggressive response despite the obvious power differential. Hu Yu, the larger of the two with a pair of wings growing out behind him, coldly snorted, overconfidence. He had seen similar situations many times. When confronted with a significant disparity in power, the humans would usually react more aggressively, though that choice tended to be driven by unrealistic fantasies. If he was still merely an innate territory lord, he would have to dodge situations like these. However, ever since he became a pseudo-royal lord, there were few human race masters that required him to proceed with caution. Jiang Kai, who was charging along beside him, warned, "Don't let your guard down." Despite saying so, they did not slow their pace. They had brought some territory lords along with them, but they had all stopped to block the 8th Order Masters who came to intercept them, so right now, it was just the two pseudo-royal lords who were fearlessly rushing straight towards the purifying Black Ink battleship with nothing but their mighty power to back them up. From a distance, the large artifacts that had been installed into the purifying Black Ink battleship began unleashing their power under the control of the remaining 8th Order Masters. However, these artifacts were only standard issue, so even though they were strengthened by spirit arrays and powered by 8th Order Masters, it was hard for these attacks to wound the two pseudo-royal lords. The two pseudo-royal lords dodged or deflected the formidable attacks as they drew nearer to the purifying Black Ink battleship. Once the gap had shrunk to a critical point, Jiang Kai and Hu Yu both unleashed their powers at the same time. A wave of intense Black Ink strength coursed through the void towards the purifying Black Ink battleship. A dazzling light barrier lit up and shielded the purifying Black Ink battleship as Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others used the defensive array to block the attacks. The never-ending stream of Black Ink strength kept colliding against the defensive array, making it ripple violently. The defensive array was under constant strain and its light quickly faded. Before the pseudo-royal lords entered close quarters, the powerful shield had already been breached. This was not because the purifying Black Ink battleship's defensive array was weak by any means, However, there were not enough masters on board the purifying black ink battleship right now. Only a pair of 8th Order masters were maintaining the array, so it was hard for it to display its full strength. If there had been sufficient masters to keep the purifying black ink battleship's defensive array up, then even though it would not be able to withstand the relentless attacks from 2 pseudo-royal lords for long, it would not have broken this quickly either. Without the protection of the defensive array, the purifying black ink battleship was akin to a human who had been stripped naked of all defenses and stood unprotected in front of 2 menacing pseudo-royal lords. As the overwhelming attacks rained down on the purifying black ink battleship, its bow shattered and many artifacts were destroyed. The remaining 8th Order masters had no choice but to assume battle formations to defend themselves, but with only a handful of 8th Order masters, it wasn't enough to fend off 2 pseudo-royal lords. Zhuo Qiuyanghua and the others were caught in a hopeless situation. Jiang Kai and Hu Yu grinned as they lunged towards the humans. Just then, Zhuo Qiuyanghua's gaze hardened. He was squeezing an array jade in his hand as he channeled a huge amount of energy into it. In the next instant, the tattered purifying black ink battleship broke apart and the 8th Order masters could barely keep their formation as a shockwave burst forth. The taunting looks on the 2 approaching pseudo-royal lords' faces had disappeared, only to be replaced by alarm and terror. Jiang Kai's eyes grew large while Hu Yu's expression rapidly shifted. As the purifying black ink battleship exploded, a pure, dazzling white light burst into existence. It was as if a great sun had exploded and its light scattered across the enormous void. Purifying light. Jiang Kai snarled, not hesitating for even a moment as both he and Hu Yu swiftly retreated. This was the exact moment Zhuo Qiuyanghua and the others were waiting for, so they were not about to let the pseudo-royal lords back away so easily. They were still in their battle formation and began casting secret techniques towards Jiang Kai. These secret techniques were not particularly damaging, but they had one thing in common, which was the ability to restrain one's opponent. The 8th Order masters did not think they would truly be able to pin down a powerful pseudo-royal lord. Their goal was only to delay him as long as possible. Their efforts paid off. Due to the effects of the secret techniques, Jiang Kai's figure grew sluggish and the burst of purifying light was able to engulf him. At the very next moment, Jiang Kai's furious, anguished cries escaped from the depths of the dazzling white light. Hu Yu was more fortunate as Zhuo Qiuyanghua and the others did not target him, but even so, he still suffered during the explosion of purifying light too. Although he had only been surrounded by the light for a brief moment, he was still in agony as he felt as if his body was on fire. Once he stumbled out of the area that was covered in purifying light, he turned back with a look of lingering fear. The Black Ink clan naturally knew about the large amounts of purifying light that were sealed inside the purifying Black Ink battleships. Over the years, many humans had fallen into the hands of the Black Ink clan and were turned into Black Ink disciples. Thus, the Black Ink clan had a fairly good understanding of their enemy. The humans also had artifacts known as evil purging divine spears that contained purifying light and were used to defeat powerful Black Ink clansmen. However, the humans had never used the purifying light inside a purifying Black Ink battleship to directly attack the Black Ink clan before. Therefore, the latter had no idea that the humans could utilize such a strategy. It cost a great deal to create a purifying Black Ink battleship, and out on the battlefields, they were generally command ships where the leaders of the human race armies gathered to strategize. Throughout all the battles, as long as the humans were not completely routed, the purifying Black Ink battleships were never destroyed. But, today, Hu Yu witnessed something new. When the huge amount of purifying light exploded out of the purifying Black Ink battleship, even a pseudo-royal lord like him had great difficulty in confronting it head-on. How is Jiang Kai? He can't be dead, right? Amid such thoughts, the dazzling light gradually faded away, and Jiang Kai's silhouette reappeared. When Hu Yu spotted him, his heart dropped. Jiang Kai was in a terrible state right now as Zhuo Qiuyanghua and the other 8th Order masters were attacking him with such ferocity that black blood was constantly splashing. Hu Yu could sense that Jiang Kai's aura was greatly weakened. He's severely injured. With wounds as grave as this, Jiang Kai would have to return to a Black Ink nest to recuperate for at least 100 years. Hu Yu could not help but feel relieved for his good fortune. Thank goodness they didn't target me. He knew that if they did, He would not have fared any better than Jiang Kai at this moment. Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others were going all out. Two pseudo-royal lords had come to attack them, and one of them was now severely injured by purifying light. It was the perfect opportunity for the humans to double down on the offensive. If they could not kill off this injured pseudo-royal lord quickly enough, they would be out of their depth once the other returned to render aid. With this in mind, Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others did not hold back at all. Paying no mind to defense, they went all out to unleash their most devastating secret techniques and divine abilities, even though it meant that they would be injured in the process too. Jiang Kai was battered by the relentless attacks and suddenly found himself in an extremely dangerous situation. Fortunately for him, Hu Yu soon came to his rescue and shouldered the brunt of the attacks. The two pseudo-royal lords came over to kill Zhuqiu Yanghua, and even though they had carelessly suffered in the process, Hu Yu was not about to abandon Jiang Kai and flee on his own. The purifying black ink battleship had exploded, so the humans no longer had any means of defending themselves against them. With Hu Yu joining the fight, the pressure that Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others faced increased manifold, and all of the Eighth Order Masters knew that their battle had been lost. They did not manage to kill Jiang Kai in time, so they no longer stood a fighting chance. However, this only made them even more determined to fight to the bitter end. Initially, even with their combined strength, they would have only been able to hold their own against a single pseudo-royal lord. Right now, Jiang Kai was not in peak condition, and while Hu Yu was relatively unscathed, the fight was still intense between both parties. That being said, both sides knew what the outcome would be. The humans were destined to die. This was just their final desperate show of resistance, with them being too injured to even use those mutually destructive secret techniques again. Martial Peak. Martial Peak, Chapter 5832, Joining the Fight, Martial Peak. The battle was intense, and with each passing moment, more lives were lost on both sides. The other Eighth Order Masters saw the predicament that Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others had fallen into, and they were beside themselves with worry, but they were all occupied with their own opponents and could not lend a hand. After just moments of clashing, Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others' frenzied strength was beginning to weaken. For the sake of killing Jiang Kai, the Eighth Order Masters had unleashed their most powerful secret techniques, but these methods were similar to Yang Kai's soul-rending thorn in that they not only harmed their enemy, but also themselves. Alas, they failed to kill Jiang Kai in time and were now injured themselves, so it was challenging for them to continue putting up a fight. Even so, the Eighth Order Masters were determined to fight to the end. Jiang Kai and Hu Yu seemed to have noticed this as well and were no longer in a rush. They remained defensive the whole time to prolong the fight as they were waiting for Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others to expend all their strength before dealing the final, crushing blow. This was the safest way for them to proceed with this battle. After many years of clashing against the humans, they had garnered numerous experiences and learned the hard way to never underestimate their enemy, especially when they were desperate. Many a time, the humans who were on the verge of defeat were able to unleash startlingly powerful attacks at the very last breath, just before perishing. If the pseudo-royal lords were not careful, there was a high chance that they could end up with an unexpected failure instead of a complete victory. Such incidents had happened numerous times in the past. Thus, even Jiang Kai, who was heavily injured, was able to remain patient and quell his ferocious murderous intent. He did not allow his rage to overpower his reason. Amidst the devastation across the battlefield, an undetectable silhouette was rushing unnoticed towards Zhuqiu Yanghua and the others. Yang Kai, now a Ninth Order Master, was using Thunder Shadow's innate divine ability to stealthily infiltrate the battlefield. It was highly unlikely that a true royal lord would be able to sense his approach, let alone these pseudo-royal lords. This innate divine ability was incredibly useful. For instance, inside the universe furnace, Yang Kai had used it to snatch the supreme grade open heaven pill away from the Chaos Spirit King. However, despite its usefulness, there was still a disadvantage. When Yang Kai was using it, he could not use space principles, for as soon as he did, he could no longer conceal himself. That being said, it was not a bad trade-off as he was immensely powerful now and could move at great speed even without instantaneous movement. When the purifying black ink battleship exploded, it caused a huge commotion with purifying light lighting up half the battlefield. Yang Kai's attention had naturally been drawn to it right away, so he immediately noticed the situation. Knowing that Zhuo Qiuyanghua and the others were in a perilous position, he did not waste a single breath as he rushed to their aid. Yang Kai avoided all the fights between the two armies, and in just over a dozen breaths of time, he arrived at the part of the battlefield where Zhuo Qiuyanghua and the others were clashing with the pseudo-royal lords. At the moment, the Eighth Order Master's strength had greatly diminished. Hu Yu knew that now was his chance to strike, so he charged at the humans and threw a punch with his full force, delivering a shock to the humans as their strength declined at once. To make matters worse, as the humans' injuries were piling up and their auras had grown unstable. Even the battle formation was beginning to show signs of cracking. The Eighth Order Master's hearts sank. There were two reasons why they could put up a fight against the two pseudo-royal lords until now. The first was that Jiang Kai and Hu Yu were being cautious in their attacks, but secondly, and more importantly, they were relying on their battle formation. They had formed a six-paths formation which allowed them to combine their strengths as one. However, if the battle formation broke, they would no longer be able to pose a threat to the pseudo-royal lords. Jiang Kai was already seething with rage because the humans had managed to severely injure him earlier, so when he saw the situation now, he knew he could not let this chance slip away from him. He stopped acting passively and instead followed up Hu Yu's attack with a powerful secret technique of his own that hurled straight towards the humans. Someone of his strength and power would certainly have enough discernment to strike at the most opportune moment. As black ink strength loomed over them, Zhuo Qiuyanghua and the others were now in an even more precarious situation. The battle formation that they tried so hard to maintain was on the verge of crumbling apart. They can't hold out any longer. Hu Yu noticed what was happening and growled, "Kill." As soon as he finished speaking, he began charging towards Zhuo Qiuyanghua and the others murderously. However, at that very moment, he had a strange feeling. His senses tingled with the warning of danger and alarms seemed to ring in his head. He then seemed to hear the churning of a river rushing towards him. What's that? Hu Yu was confused, but soon really saw a rampaging river appear out of nowhere and crash down on him. He instinctively tried to move away, but all at once, space solidified around him and he could not escape. Once the river washed over him, Hu Yu disappeared. Jiang Kai jumped in fright at the abrupt turn of events. He looked over to see what was happening, but all he saw was a massive river cutting through the void. As the currents surged along the great river, he could vaguely see Hu Yu's figure struggling within, but once one of the waves came crashing down, the figure disappeared. All at once, Jiang Kai's scalp grew numb and his hair raised on end as he spotted the figure standing in front of the great river. One look and he knew who this was. Yang Kai. It was the Killing Star, the one whose name was known far and wide among both the human race and the Black Ink Clan, the one who made the Black Ink Clan suffer countless terrible losses over the last few thousand years. Jiang Kai had never met Yang Kai in person before. He was one of the many innate territory lords who managed to sneak out of the primordial heavens source grand restriction, and upon his arrival at the no-return pass, he hibernated in a black ink nest to recuperate from his injuries. That went on until a few centuries ago when the war broke out in full between the human race and the Black Ink Clan. Under Mo Yu's command, many of the innate territory lords used the source fusion technique to create a large group of pseudo-royal lords to deal with the Ninth Order Masters. Jiang Kai was fortunate enough to survive the process and become a pseudo-royal lord. Thus, he had only heard of Yang Kai and how terrifying he was. He was only able to recognize Yang Kai because Mo Yi had once shown Yang Kai's face and image to all the Black Ink clansmen before they were sent out. Even now, Jiang Kai could still recall Mo Yi's instructions. If they were to encounter this person on the battlefield, their first priority should be to flee. However, if they could not flee, they were to do their best to take on Yang Kai in groups, and under no circumstances were they to fight him alone as they would not be able to hold their own against him. At the time, Jiang Kai did not think much of it. Based on the information the Black Ink Clan received, Yang Kai was sealed up inside the universe furnace and would most likely only be able to leave the next time it opened. Thus, what were his chances of running into this human on the battlefield? All along, Jiang Kai thought that Mo Yi was panicking over nothing. Nevertheless, Mo Yi was a true royal lord, so as a pseudo-royal lord himself, he could not make any objections. Despite thinking that there was very little chance of running into the human killing star, Jiang Kai did not look down on Yang Kai's strength. Multiple pseudo-royal lords died at Yang Kai's hands after he became a Ninth Order master inside the universe furnace. Even a true royal lord had fallen to the killing star. None of this information had been kept a secret, so naturally, Jiang Kai heard about everything. However, he never thought that the impossible would happen right in front of him. The killing star, who was supposed to be confined to the universe furnace, had appeared on the E5 territory battlefield, and as soon as he showed up, he used some kind of mysterious ability to incapacitate Hu Yu. He has his eyes on me now. Jiang Kai felt chills running down his spine. The cold look in the eyes of his opponent made him feel as if death itself was staring at him. Just as the wheels in Jiang Kai's mind finished spinning, Yang Kai hoisted the spear in his hand and thrust it out. A torrent of spear shadows instantly loomed over Jiang Kai's head. Jiang Kai had been extremely wary of the strange river where Hu Yu had vanished, but he did not expect Yang Kai to forego using it against him. Thus, he was completely unprepared for the attack. He had no way of retaliating against the sudden attack. If he had been at his peak, he might have been able to hold out against Yang Kai for a little while, but he had been gravely injured by the purifying light that burst forth when the purifying black ink battleship exploded. Thus, he was no match at the moment. Black blood splattered everywhere as Jiang Kai gasped in agony. He stumbled backwards from the onslaught of never-ending attacks. No matter how much strength he tried to muster, he could not do anything to block his opponent. A few short breaths later, Jiang Kai froze in place, his eyes wide with terror and bitterness. Yang Kai casually raised his spear with one hand before jabbing it through Jiang Kai's chest. The spear jerked and unleashed a ferocious force that turned the pseudo-royal lord into a cloud of blood mist. It had been less than 10 breaths of time since Yang Kai's sudden appearance, but in that time, he managed to kill a pseudo-royal lord while restraining another. Meanwhile, Zhuo Qiuyonghua and the others had come to terms with their impending deaths and were about to make one last attempt to gravely injure their opponents, but now, they were simply standing to the side in complete shock. They were all struck with disbelief. How did he show up here? However, they quickly snapped out of it as they filled up with renewed energy. Regardless of why he came, the fact that he was here meant that the Black Ink clan in E5 territory were doomed. After dealing with the two pseudo-royal lords, Yang Kai glanced at Zhuo Qiuyonghua and the others. When he confirmed that there was no threat to their lives despite their depleted strength and serious injuries, he was able to relax and nod lightly to them before his figure vanished. After witnessing Yang Kai summoning the space-time river to confine Hu Yu and slaughtering Jiang Kai right after, masters across the battlefield, be they humans or Black Ink clansmen, were shaken to their core. The sudden eruption of a Ninth Order master's strength was akin to a brilliant sun that illuminated the darkness of the chaotic battlefield. Furthermore, it was accompanied by the disturbance of the death of a pseudo-royal lord. The humans' spirits soared. Even though they had no clue which master had come to their aid, they knew for certain that it was a Ninth Order master. On the other hand, those from the Black Ink clan were petrified and filled with dread. Since that human killed a pseudo-royal lord that quickly, it's probably one of the two old ancestors, right? Though the other Ninth Order masters were powerful as well, they had only recently reached the Ninth Order Open Heaven realm, so it was impossible for them to unleash a force this imposing. The Black Ink clan masters were busy making their guesses when all of a sudden, a pseudo-royal lord's furious yet terrified roar rang out from a corner of the battlefield, Yang Kai. As soon as the pseudo-royal lord managed to get the name out, his aura vanished. No one knew what happened to him. All at once, all from the Black Ink clan fell into a stunned daze. It would not have been as serious of a situation if either Xiao Xiao or Wu Qing had come. Though these two veteran Ninth Order masters were stronger than the other Ninth Order humans, the Black Ink clan was still able to deal with them. After all, the pseudo-royal lords had a lot of experience going up against the Ninth Order masters by now. By forming a Three Fortunes formation with 3 pseudo-royal lords, they could put up a fight against any Ninth Order master. However, if it was Yang Kai who came, then things were going to be a lot more difficult for them. Martial Peak. Martial Peak, Chapter 5833, A Show of Strength. Martial Peak. The roar of shock and bewilderment echoed across the void, startling the Black Ink clan. Yang Kai's fame preceded him, and out of all the Ninth Order Masters, the Black Ink clan was most afraid of him, the one who should have been confined inside the universe furnace right now. Though they had no clue as to how he managed to escape, he did indeed show up here. Following the cry of fury and alarm, the aura of yet another pseudo-royal lord disappeared without a trace. It did not seem as if he had died. Instead, it was as though he was isolated somewhere and his aura became undetectable. Formations. Get into battle formations. A pseudo-royal lord roared. The pseudo-royal lords then swiftly withdrew from the fights they were in to gather among themselves. The Red Flame Army did not have a Ninth Order Master among their ranks, so most of the time, the pseudo-royal lords did not team up into formations. Although they could form a Three Fortunes formation, usually, they would only do so if they were under some kind of pressure from the situation they were in. They were under no such threat in E5 territory, so they mostly chose to fight alone. This allowed them to occupy the attention of even more Eighth Order Masters, and it also gave them more freedom to move around. However, a real threat had arrived and they were immediately under great pressure, so naturally, they chose to link up their auras and quickly form Three Fortunes formations. This allowed them to feel a little more secure. Nearly 20 pseudo-royal lords had been sent to E5 territory. Their high number explained why the Red Flame Army failed to claim this territory despite being a mighty army with the finest fighters and arms, assisted by numerous powerful divine spirits. Now that most of the pseudo-royal lords had formed battle formations, there were 2 of them remaining who could not form one and were stuck in an awkward predicament. A battle formation could not be formed with just 2 pseudo-royal lords, but there was no other pseudo-royal lord around to form a trio with them. It was as if they had been abandoned by their allies. They felt annoyed and resentful for having been too slow. Nevertheless, they had their wits about them still. Since they could not form a battle formation, they immediately withdrew from the battlefield and moved to the rear. Once the pseudo-royal lords had their battle formations to rely upon, they felt more confident. However, when they looked around and saw what was happening in front of them, their expressions morphed into shock and terror. Yang Kai was cutting across the battlefield without hiding himself at all. He had a long, meandering river around him that was like a massive dragon swimming through the void. Wherever he went, the great river surged and its currents washed over countless Black Ink clansmen, all of whom disappeared as a result. On the other hand, even if some humans were entangled with the captured Black Ink clansmen, they were completely unaffected. No one could stand in Yang Kai's way. Even the territory lords could not defend themselves from the rampaging river. Yang Kai was single-handedly carving out a path through the intense battlefield. What the hell is that thing? All the pseudo-royal lords were thunderstruck by the river that was circling around Yang Kai. They were formidable masters in their own right, but even though they had such power, they did not have the confidence that they could cut through the battlefield this easily. After all, the humans were not pushovers. However, Yang Kai was doing what they could not. He did not stop moving and did not have to do anything else either. He simply relied on that strange river to accomplish this feat. The pseudo-royal lords could not help but recall the information Mo Nae had provided in the past. When Yang Kai was inside the universe furnace, he used a strange river to kill multiple pseudo-royal lords. It seemed to be a river that was formed by a multitude of Dao strengths. Falling into the river was essentially a death sentence. Yang Kai was rushing about, seemingly charging straight at the pseudo-royal lords, causing them to feel trepidatious. They knew that they could not defend themselves from Yang Kai's attacks, but as pseudo-royal lords, they could not allow themselves to flee at the mere sight of him either. After all, they should be able to put up a fight against him now. After composing themselves, the pseudo-royal lords began communicating with each other, and they soon came up with a strategy. Meanwhile, Yang Kai, who was flying across the battlefield, was feeling a little helpless. Initially, he wanted to use Thunder Shadow's innate divine ability to sneak up on the pseudo-royal lords. With the difference in strength between him and a pseudo-royal lord, as well as the help of Thunder Shadow's innate divine ability, he would certainly be able to kill them off one by one. Anyone he had his eyes on would not be able to escape. He did not need to kill too many, just a third of them would do. However, he was forced to expose himself in order to save Zhuo Qiu Yanghua and the others, and now that he had summoned the space-time river, There was no way he could hide his presence any longer. That being said, the space-time river proved to be highly effective on this battlefield with massive numbers on both sides. Even though the size of his space-time river could not compare with the infinite river that flowed through the universe furnace world, it was still quite expansive. Wherever the river flowed, Yang Kai could clear the place in a flash, as all from the Black Ink clansmen would be sucked into the river. With so many violent Dao strengths filling the space-time river, most of the Black Ink clansmen died the moment they fell into it. Even the few stronger ones could only barely survive for a few breaths. In just a few moments, Yang Kai had cut across the entire battlefield. He instantly saw 3 pseudo-royal lords in a battle formation charging over to him, while even more of them were trying to come around from the sides. Yang Kai did not care about the pseudo-royal lords who were taking the longer route. Instead, he met the 3 in front of him head-on. Chills ran down the spines of the 3. It took a lot of courage for them to face off against the Killing Star. They were only able to muster up the courage to do so because they were now pseudo-royal lords and had allies of similar strength to back them up. When they saw Yang Kai rushing towards them, they had to force down their urge to run away as they desperately began hurling powerful secret techniques at him. Yang Kai did not attempt to dodge these attacks at all. The dark bolts of light all shot into the space-time river, causing the waves to become even more turbulent as it churned with great ferocity, but Yang Kai remained unscathed. The distance between them continued to shorten, and all of a sudden, Yang Kai lunged forward. He abruptly appeared near the 3 pseudo-royal lords and eyed them coldly as he sneered, "You're quite bold." He made a grabbing motion and was somehow able to hold the space-time river in his hand. With a quick, forceful flick, the great river seemed to turn into a long whip that closed in around the 3 pseudo-royal lords. They never thought that the space-time river could take on a new form in such a strange way. As they were caught off guard, they could not avoid the river whip. The Dao strength swirled around them and cut into their flesh and souls. Their battle formation, which had been weak in the first place, instantly crumbled apart. An enormous wave crashed down upon the 3 pseudo-royal lords, and they were all sucked into the space-time river. Filled with terror, they immediately tried to resist and drag themselves out of the space-time river, but it was as if the waters had turned into quicksand. No matter how hard they struggled, it did them no good. Waves of Dao strengths continued to crash down on them and, one by one, their struggling silhouettes disappeared into the depths of the river. After a brief encounter with Yang Kai, all 3 pseudo-royal lords vanished and there was no way of ascertaining whether or not they were even alive or dead. When the other pseudo-royal lords saw what happened, their hair stood on end and they were chilled to the bone. After many years of battle experience, the Black Ink clan confirmed that a battle formation of 3 pseudo-royal lords was powerful enough to take on a Ninth Order master. All of the current Ninth Order masters, be it the new ones or the older, more experienced ones, could not do much against 3 pseudo-royal lords in a battle formation. Even though a trio of pseudo-royal lords would not be able to defeat a Ninth Order master either, they were still enough to keep the latter occupied. The pseudo-royal lords were fully aware of Yang Kai's terrifying reputation, and they had also done their best to avoid underestimating him. Thus, when they noticed his presence, they all abandoned their original opponents and formed battle formations before attempting to take him on. They wanted to rely on the strength of all the pseudo-royal lords combined to deal with Yang Kai. They knew Yang Kai had his space secret techniques which allowed him to escape from a losing fight, but they were also willing to accept the possibility of simply driving him off. The pseudo-royal lords never imagined that Yang Kai's formidability in battle and the horror of going up against him would far exceed their estimations. As soon as the 3 pseudo-royal lords crossed paths with him, they were immediately lost to the great river, their fates completely unknown. The pseudo-royal lords began wondering whether they could truly take on such an opponent. Yang Kai did not waste any time. He swiveled around and began charging at another group of 3 pseudo-royal lords who no longer had the guts to face him head-on. They had just seen what happened to their fellow pseudo-royal lords earlier and were not keen on sharing the same end. Therefore, after a brief moment of hesitation, the 3 pseudo-royal lords split up and started fleeing in 3 different directions. Yang Kai was amused as he roared, "Where are you trying to run?" He dragged the space-time river with one hand and rushed after one of the pseudo-royal lords. When the latter turned around and saw this, he immediately panicked. The three pseudo-royal lords had scattered to escape on their own, so he had no idea why he was the unlucky one who was now targeted by the killing star. He could not hesitate for even a single moment as he quickly used a life-saving secret technique, spitting out a huge mouthful of black blood as his speed dramatically increased. All at once, the pseudo-royal lords' attempt to surround and confine Yang Kai had been negated. They lost all their will to fight after seeing the first group of pseudo-royal lords vanishing into the space-time river. The pseudo-royal lord that Yang Kai had his eye on was not the only one who was trying to flee now. All the other pseudo-royal lords were running off as well. They were afraid that Yang Kai would turn around and hunt them down next. As Yang Kai went after the pseudo-royal lord, he had to focus on using his might to quell the commotion inside the space-time river. Meanwhile, out on the battlefield, without the pseudo-royal lords to aid in combat and lead the battle, the Black Ink clan army was severely weakened. The Eighth Order Masters and the Divine Spirits naturally seized this chance to cut into the enemy lines. Soon, the battle that had been a virtual stalemate for years dramatically tipped in favor of one side. The humans had the upper hand, whereas the Black Ink clan was losing miserably. The leaders of the Eastern, Southern, Western, and Northern armies made the most of this opportunity. Orders went out to all four armies that made up the Red Flame Army, and they charged onto the battlefield to secure a landslide victory by wiping out the Black Ink clan. In just half a day, the Black Ink clan army had been routed and the scattered handfuls of survivors quickly retreated towards their stronghold. Alas, the humans were not going to let this chance slip away from them. The commanders made the call and the Red Flame Army hunted down the remaining Black Ink clansmen. They were able to slaughter many along the way, and Black Ink's strength that escaped from the dead corpses seemed to fill nearly half the void. It was an overwhelming victory for the Red Flame Army, and they only stopped the chase once they were half a day's travel away from the Black Ink clan's main base. Marshall Peak. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5834. Slaughter, Marshall Peak. As the battle came to an end, the Red Flame Army at last tasted victory that had long eluded them. Many lives had been sacrificed in the process, but even so, they could not hide their joy. The army commanders gave the order and everyone began cleaning up the battlefield. Universe fragments were dragged over and a temporary base was created in the void. The human race army gathered at the spot which was directly opposite the Black Ink clan's main base in the distance. The two bases were only half a day's travel apart, so the stronger masters with keener eyesight could even see what was happening inside their enemy's stronghold. They could tell that the Black Ink clan was on high alert. Now and then, the aura of a pseudo-royal lord would flicker and flash. It was as if the Black Ink clan was trying to scare the humans, but that only proved that they were putting up a strong front. Throughout the war, the Red Flame Army reclaimed many great territories, but they faced the most resistance in E5 territory by far. In the previous great territories, the Black Ink clan rarely engaged the humans in large-scale battles. It was almost as if they surrendered without much of a fight. The Red Flame Army had suffered many losses throughout the decade of war in E5 territory, but in the battle today, they managed to deal a crushing blow to the Black Ink clan army and slaughter many of their masters. The humans were thrilled, and they were even more excited because it seemed as if a Ninth Order master was joining them. All along, the Red Flame Army and 5 other armies did not have a Ninth Order master assuming command, leaving them deeply envious of the Azure Sun Army, the Profound Nether Army, and others with Ninth Order masters leading them. The presence or absence of a Ninth Order master made things feel entirely different. Having a Ninth Order master made them feel as if they were children who were well loved and cared for, and not having one made them feel like orphans that no one cared about. Nevertheless, they soon regrouped and prepared themselves for the next battle. On a universe fragment that was just 10,000 kilometers away from the temporary base, Yang Kai sat cross-legged with the space-time river weaving around him. The long river was churning with a violent undercurrent that sent tumultuous waves crashing all over. This could not be helped as the river was currently suppressing 5 pseudo-royal lords. Even with the power that Yang Kai had now, this was his limit. During the battle, he first used the space-time river to restrain Hu Yu before killing Jiang Kai, who was already heavily injured. Then, he used the space-time river to suck up the 3 pseudo-royal lords who charged at him. He already felt the pressure when there were 4 of them inside there. The pseudo-royal lords would not just stand idly by and allow themselves to die inside the space-time river. They kept struggling relentlessly, and Yang Kai had to dedicate a large amount of his strength and focus to keep them suppressed. Witnessing Yang Kai suppress and capture 3 pseudo-royal lords who had been in a battle formation in one go, the rest of the pseudo-royal lords became terrified and began fleeing. In reality, if they had chosen to gang up on Yang Kai at that moment, he would have had to flee from them at once too. Approximately 2/3 of Yang Kai's strength was currently being used to quell the commotion inside the space-time river. Even he could not hold his own against that many formidable opponents. Still, the Black Ink clan had never witnessed such a bizarre method before. They were frightened by the way the 3 pseudo-royal lords disappeared after simply coming face to face with Yang Kai. Thus, knowing how fearsome Yang Kai was, they did not have the guts to stick around anymore, and they immediately ran off. The last pseudo-royal lord that Yang Kai targeted did not manage to escape either. Yang Kai had purposely delayed for a little while before swallowing that pseudo-royal lord up with the river, allowing the others to think they had gotten away on their own as opposed to him not being able to go after them. Therefore, there were 5 pseudo-royal lords sealed up inside the space-time river right now, and around 4/5 of Yang Kai's strength was tied up suppressing them. If that had not been the case, he would have charged straight into the Black Ink clan's stronghold by now rather than letting them delay the inevitable. Silhouettes began moving swiftly from the humans' temporary base towards Yang Kai's position. The 4 army commanders of the Red Flame Army's eastern, southern, western, and northern armies were in the lead, and they were followed by over a dozen powerful divine spirits. When this group came over and saw Yang Kai with the space-time river around him, reverence colored their expressions. "Greetings, sir." Everyone bowed in greeting. Yang Kai smiled and raised his hand, at ease. Zhuqiu Yanghua was pale-faced as he and the other 8th Order Masters had been injured during their earlier fight when Jiang Kai and Huyu came to attack them. They would have surely met their doom if Yang Kai had not come to their rescue at the last moment. Now that Yang Kai had summoned the various army and division commanders, Zhuqiu Yanghua did not waste any time recuperating from his injuries and immediately rushed over with everyone else. In terms of age and generational seniority, Zhuqiu Yanghua was far above Yang Kai. However, in this chaotic world where many geniuses were born, a person's strength determined their authority. Zhuqiu Yang thanked Yang Kai for saving his life before asking, "Why did you call us over, sir?" "To kill the enemy." Yang Kai smiled faintly. Zhuqiu Yanghua immediately turned his eyes to the space-time river. He already guessed as much when he came over and spotted the space-time river still flowing about, and Yang Kai's words confirmed it for him. He was not the only one who figured this out, as it was far too obvious. All of them could see that a struggling figure would occasionally be visible within the space-time river. It was clear that the pseudo-royal lords who were confined inside were not about to go down without a fight. It dawned on the crowd that though the strange river was useful when it came to restraining enemies, it was not strong enough to take the lives of pseudo-royal lords. There was no reason for them to hesitate, so the 8th Order Masters and Divine Spirits immediately formed battle formations and prepared themselves. Once they were all in position, Yang Kai raised his hand, and in the very next breath, a figure stormed back out of the space-time river. It was Huyu, the first one who had been suppressed inside the river. As soon as he appeared, brutal attacks were launched at him from all directions before he could even grasp what was happening. Huyu was terrified and quickly tried to defend himself, but how could he react in time? Even though a pseudo-royal lord was immensely powerful, the combined strength of nearly 100 8th Order Masters and Divine Spirits was not something he was capable of resisting even at his peak. Thus, in the face of the avalanche of attacks, Huyu exploded into a cloud of blood before he could even cry out in agony. Many of the humans were stunned at this sight. After so many years of battling against the Black Ink clan, it was their first time killing a pseudo-royal lord, and they had done it so easily too. They could not help but feel as if they were dreaming. Then again, even a true 9th Order Master would not necessarily be able to withstand the attacks of that many masters, let alone a pseudo-royal lord. Huyu was dead, but Yang Kai did not stop there. The space-time river rippled once more and another figure stumbled out. Similarly, he was greeted with a barrage of ferocious attacks from all directions. The Black Ink clan's base camp was situated on a large universe fragment that was covered in black ink nests. Their remaining forces had all gathered together and their hearts were heavy with dread. The Killing Star was back. In this battle, the Black Ink clan lost 6 pseudo-royal lords and countless other masters. Even though they managed to flee back to their stronghold, the pseudo-royal lords did not feel secure at all. The thought of Yang Kai's earlier display made them extremely fearful. The strange river seemed to contain a mysterious power that they could not deal with. Now that the army had suffered a crushing defeat, the pseudo-royal lords were beside themselves with worry as they did not know what to do next. Previously, the pseudo-royal lords who numbered almost 20 in total had gathered here under Mo-Na's orders to decimate the Red Flame army by killing as many human race masters as possible. Everything had been going according to plan. The Black Ink clan had been in control of the battle as they had the strength of a large number of pseudo-royal lords backing them, so they were certain they would achieve their goal in just a few more years. However, everything fell apart thanks to the arrival of a single human. The pseudo-royal lords who fled back to their stronghold held a simple discussion. They quickly decided to send news regarding Yang Kai's arrival back to the no-return pass. In reality, they wanted to immediately retreat, but they dared not leave the area without Mo-Na's orders, so they had no choice but to group together and watch out for any possible attacks on them. When Sir Mo-Na came back from the universe furnace, he brought back some information regarding Yang Kai, including information about that peculiar river. Sir Mo-Na said the river seems to be made out of Yang Kai's Dao strengths. It can be used to attack or defend and is incredibly effective when used to restrain opponents. So, even though they were captured, they could still be alive. All was quiet and somber when a pseudo-royal lord suddenly spoke up. He had an ox head with 2 horns sticking out. It was as if he did not completely assume human form yet. They've fallen into the hands of the Killing Star. Does being dead or not make a difference? One of the pseudo-royal lords retorted darkly. What I meant is, since they're not dead, should we try to rescue them? The ox-head pseudo-royal lord asked. The pseudo-royal lords all turned towards the ox-head pseudo-royal lord at once. It was as if they were staring at a lunatic. We barely managed to escape from that Killing Star. It's good enough that he didn't chase us down, so how can you even think about trying to pick a fight with him? Do you have a death wish? They were all once innate territory lords who became pseudo-royal lords with the help of the source fusion technique. They had all experienced a narrow brush with death in the process, so they cherished their lives even more than the ordinary Black Ink clansmen. None of them dared to agree with the ox-head pseudo-royal lord's suggestion. The ox-head pseudo-royal lord frowned. Although Yang Kai is strong, if this many of us pseudo-royal lords join hands, I don't think we need to fear him. I studied the situation earlier. Even though that river is strange, it's not impossible to get around it. Yang Kai should be at his limit, keeping 5 pseudo-royal lords confined inside the river. Jiang Kai was killed, but Hu Yu and the others are still alive. If we don't rescue them, how are we to explain ourselves to Sir Mo Yu and Sir Mo-Na if they question us about this? The pseudo-royal lords felt exasperated by what he was saying, but they could not refute him either. Nevertheless, none of them felt willing to go up against the Killing Star. Furthermore, rescuing them is also a way for us to protect ourselves. By rescuing them, we will strengthen our side and stand a better chance if we must fight Yang Kai in the future, the ox-head pseudo-royal lord added. One of the pseudo-royal lords agreed. He has a point. If we don't rescue them, we'll be in a disastrous situation the moment Yang Kai comes after us. Thus, the dozen or so pseudo-royal lords were caught between 2 hard choices. On one hand, they did not dare to mount a rescue attempt. The bizarre tactics that Yang Kai had previously used were far too frightening. On the other hand, if they did not try to rescue the captured pseudo-royal lords, those 5 were surely doomed, and once Yang Kai was freed up again, he would turn his attention back on the rest of them. However, before the pseudo-royal lords could come to an agreement on what to do, the extinguishing of a top master's vitality reverberated across the void. Even though there was quite a distance between the 2 bases, the pseudo-royal lords picked up on the commotion with crystal clarity. That was Hu Yu. The ox-head pseudo-royal lord turned in the direction the commotion had come from, and he could not help but sigh. there's no point going over now. Since the humans had started their slaughter, it was already too late. True enough, they began sensing the deaths of even more pseudo-royal lords. Each death caused a huge disturbance, and in short order, the fallout occurred 5 times. This meant that the 5 captured pseudo-royal lords had all been executed. All at once, the surviving pseudo-royal lords could not help but feel grief over the lives that had been lost, as it could have very easily been them who suffered this fate. Marshall Peak. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,